Hello, dear soul. Welcome to Trans Mama's Guide. I'm your trans mama, here to offer truth, acceptance, and real advice for queer lives. Whether you're coming out, healing, or just figuring things out, you've got a guide who gets it. Let's grow together. Welcome to the family. I must admit, when I was talking about doing my first video, it wasn't something as momentous as we're going to talk about today. So today's topic and presentation is going to feel a little bit rushed, but I think it's incredibly important that we talk about it right now. But the classroom is not the right place for this, so we need a change of scenery. Let's go. All right, as you can see, it's been quite a change of scenery. I would like to personally welcome you to the Moakley Courthouse, courtroom number 9 in the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts. This is where a majority of this story takes place. But before I get into all the great details about what happened today, the first thing we need to do is give you a little bit of backstory. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning when this all started, which is on January the 20th, the day that Donald J. Trump took office as the new president of the United States. On that first day, he issued an executive order called Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. And basically this very long, very wordy executive order was designed to create only 2 gender identities in the United States, and those gender identities would be determined by your sex assigned at birth on an unamended birth certificate. Now, that was filed on January the 20th. And the State Department immediately scrambled to update the passport policies and to make sure that you couldn't go through and change your gender on your Social Security account and that sort of thing. Now let's go forward a few weeks to February the 7th, where 7 plaintiffs filed a lawsuit and named Donald J. Trump as the defendant in his official capacity as the President of the United States. A lot of stuff was going back and forth, and they were basically requesting an injunction from the judge to bar the State Department from enforcing the policies set forth by that executive order on January the 20th. Obviously, it's going to be a long thing. This case might be years long. We'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the video. But on April the 18th, a little over 2 months from the initial date of filing, the judge actually entered an order for preliminary injunction. Now, a lot of you may have read about this on some of the pro or anti-LGBT websites, but that preliminary injunction only covered only covered 6 of the 7 plaintiffs originally in the case. It did not apply to anybody else. So a week later, the plaintiffs and their lawyers entered an amended complaint, and then 5 days later, entered a motion to certify classes. And what a class is a large group of people who are all being represented by the plaintiffs or the defendants who are in court. And they were requesting the certification of classes to include basically anyone who wanted to have a gender identity marker that was different from what they were born with. So they proposed some class definitions. The judge looked over them. The judge decided that she wanted to propose some amended class definitions, and she issued that order of proposed amendments on May 27th. And for another three and a half weeks, the 2 parties went back and forth and tried to figure out, Who's going to have the best case for this? Keep in mind, we already have a preliminary injunction, which basically means that the judge feels that these plaintiffs are going to win this case based on the merits that they have brought. That is great news. However, today, on June 17th, the judge issued an order to certify the classes that were amended originally on May 27th, and she updated the preliminary injunction to include the classes that were certified. Now, we're basically caught up. I'm going to actually put up this judge's order on the screen here next to me, and we're going to go over it page by page. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to go back to my classroom and we're going to talk about it. And I'm going to break this down into a way that someone who doesn't understand all this legal mumbo jumbo can get it, right? But trust me, this is great news. For the reasons set forth in the memorandum and order issued today, ECF 115, the plaintiff's motion to apply the preliminary injunction to a subset of the M/F and X designation classes, ECF 79, is granted. Pursuant to the Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 65A, the court orders as follows. Number 1, the preliminary injunction class, PI class, shall include all individuals who are 1, a member of the M/F designation class or the X designation class, and 2, either A, do not have a currently valid passport, B, need to renew their current passport because it expires within 1 year, C, need to make changes to their passport to have the sex designation on it align with their gender identity or to reflect a name change, or D, need to apply for another passport because their passport was lost, stolen, or damaged. Point number 2. Defendants Marco Rubio, in his official capacity as Secretary of State, and the U.S. Department of State, jointly the agency defendants, as well as all officers, agents, employees, attorneys, and any other person acting in concert with or behalf of the agency defendants, are enjoined from enforcing the passport policy as that term is defined in today's memorandum and order, see ECF 115 at 1 to 2, as to members of the PI class. The agency defendants are further enjoined to process and issue passports to members of the PI class consistent with the State Department's policy as of January 19th, 2025, and to permit members of the PI class to self-select a sex designation M, F, or X that is different from the sex assigned to those individuals under the passport policy. 3. If the agency defendants conclude that it is necessary to request additional information to determine whether a passport applicant is a member of the PI class, they may instruct applicants to attest by checking a box to the following statement when they submit their passport application. If I am selecting a sex marker that is different than the sex on my original birth certificate, or if I am selecting an X sex marker, I confirm that at least one of the following is true. Number 1, my gender identity is different from the sex assigned to me at birth, or number 2, I have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. I further confirm that I am applying for a passport because one of the following is true. 1, I do not have a currently valid passport. 2, I need to renew my current passport because it expires within 1 year. 3, I need to make changes to my passport to have the sex designation on it align with my gender identity or to reflect a name change. Or 4, I need to apply for another passport because my passport was lost, stolen, or damaged. Number 4. No security under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 65C is necessary or warranted in the circumstances of this case, as the class members seek to vindicate important constitutional and statutory rights, and the defendants have not requested any security. Number 5. This preliminary injunction shall take effect immediately upon the docketing of this order, and shall remain in effect until the entry of judgment in this matter, unless this court, the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, or the U.S. Supreme Court orders otherwise. So ordered, Julia E. Kobick, United States District Judge, June 17th, 2025. So point number 1 here, the preliminary injunction class shall include individuals who are, and basically what they're talking about here is for individuals who feel that they belong to a male or female designation class, but are not designated that on their passport currently, or are at risk of having their gender marker reverted back because they have applied for a request for sex change prior to this enforcement action. And also the X designation. That was something that was totally done away with in the executive order because they did not want to acknowledge the fact that anyone could be non-binary or other. So now, with this order of preliminary injunction, the X marker's coming back, and the ability to choose your gender marker is coming back as well. I would like to believe that the conditions that they gave, the 4 points I think it was, covers pretty much everything. So you've got, let's see, we've got A, B, C, and D. So letter A is if you don't have a passport. Letter B is if you have a passport that's expiring within 1 year because they don't anticipate that this court case will finish up within a year. If you need to make changes to the gender marker on your passport because let's say you are a male to female like I am, but for some reason your passport says male. Either that's what it's always said, or for some reason you took an action after this executive order took effect, and when you got your passport back, they put an M on it instead of the F that you used to have. Also, in C, if you want to simply request a name change, like I'm going to be doing in a couple of weeks, they cannot change your gender marker back when you request your name change. And then letter D, if you need to apply for another passport because it was lost, stolen, or damaged. So basically, if you don't have one, if you do have one and it's expiring soon, if you do have one and your gender marker's wrong, or your name is wrong, or you have a passport that is damaged. I think that covers almost everybody, right? Point number 2 here in the order is basically just telling Marco Rubio, who is the Secretary of State, he's over the State Department, which handles the processing of passport applications, that him and his department employees, contractors, anybody who's working under the umbrella of the State Department cannot enforce the passport policy that was set forth in the executive order on January the 20th. Furthermore, it requires them to enforce the policies as they were on January 19th before the president signed the executive order, before he was officially installed in office. It furthermore clarifies that they must permit members of the PI class to self-select their own designation, MF or X, that is different from the marker that was assigned to them. One of the points that the opposition brought up in a motion was that there was no way to basically prove that someone was actually genuinely gender dysphoric or non-binary or whatever, and they requested that there be some way for them to verify or whatever, which, I mean, obviously, if they were going to request verification, they would request something so obscenely hard or maybe even impossible to get that you would never be able to do it. In point 3 here, the judge basically lays out the requirements that if the defendants, which is the State Department, choose that they want to require additional information for the certification that you are indeed a part of one of these classes, they can only require you to attest by checking a box that you are a member of one of those classes. And point 4 there is basically just saying that, the Federal Rule of Civil Procedure basically doesn't apply in this case because the defendants have not requested security for their interests. And then point 5, probably the most important thing here, the preliminary injunction takes effect immediately as soon as they docket this, and it has been docketed, so it is in effect as of right now. And this will stay in effect until the court finalizes a decision at the end of the case, which could be a very long time. Then at which point, let's say, well, let me just erase this board here, and we will fill it up with some new information, and I'm going to explain to you how this court process works. Let's talk about exactly how the court system works here. So we're in the U.S. District Court in the District of Massachusetts. The District Court has jurisdiction over the entirety of the United States. So what that means is that this order that was filed today applies to all 50 states, and the only way for them to change the conclusion of a district court would be to appeal that decision up to the next court, which is the Court of Appeals. And for this court, for Massachusetts, that appeal would go to the Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. And one of the interesting things about the First Circuit Court of Appeals, every single judge that sits on the First Circuit Appellate Court is a democratically appointed judge. There are no Republican appointed judges. So it's highly unlikely that they would win in appeals court. And the next step beyond that would be to petition the Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari, which is basically begging them to hear the case, right? That's highly unlikely because the Supreme Court is already hearing several cases involving transgender rights and gender identity and stuff like that. And I'll cover some more of those as we get closer. We're actually waiting on a decision to come out in one of them here pretty quick in the next couple of weeks. The Supreme Court is unlikely to accept an appeal. They'll probably kick it down to whatever court handled it before. And I dare say what will happen if they lose this case in the district court and they go to the First Circuit Court of Appeals is the First Circuit Court of Appeal is going to read the thoughts of the Honorable Kobick here. They're going to look at the defendants in the case, which when they go to appeals court, they'll become the plaintiffs. So they will look at Marco Rubio and his lawyers and they'll be like, nuh-uh, we're not going to accept this appeal. We are going to send it back down to the court below us, and that is where the ruling is going to stay. I believe at that point they can petition the Supreme Court for certiorari, but they cannot appeal it anymore after that. So if the First Circuit Court of Appeals kicks it back down and says, no, we're staying with the ruling of the district court, and the Supreme Court denies certiorari, it is now effectively the law and on the books until somebody challenges it and it gets changed. So that's kind of where we're at. This case is going to draw out for a long time, I'm sure, but until we come to a final conclusion, there is a preliminary injunction in effect that will allow you, as someone who will certify that they have gender dysphoria or they feel that they are not the gender that they were assigned at birth, you can now go in and get your passport with the gender marker that you want, including an X if you are non-binary. The only downside to having the X on your passport is that you will not be able to travel internationally by air, I believe. By air or by sea. I think if you can cross it in a car and go from one country to another, I think that's okay. But if you want to like fly to Germany, they're not going to accept X in Germany. You're going to have an M or an F. But other than that, if you're just wanting it for identification, if you live in a state where it's incredibly hard to change the marker on your state ID and you want the X, by all means go for it. Just keep in mind, you're going to have a hard time traveling internationally with an X. But other than that, this is incredibly great news. I was genuinely worried that I was going to wind up having an M on my passport. But now, thanks to the Honorable Julia Kobick, I'm going to have a passport with my female picture, my female marker, and my female name. And that makes me happy, happier than I have been in a long time. I have been wanting to do this since 2008, and I could just never work myself up to do it, and now I can, and I can have everything that I need. And so can you. I want to thank you so much for sticking around to the end of this video and listening to me. I know it might seem like this video was, like I said, kind of crushed together in a hurry, and that's because it was. I literally learned about this order probably 3 hours ago, and now I'm recording the video, and it's about to be midnight here on the East Coast. So at least I'll finish doing the recording before the next day. But guys, this is awesome. We have judges on our side. We have a court system that's on our side. It's a really hard thing to envision right now because it seems like the whole world is trying to push us underground and bury us and pretend like we don't exist. But you do exist. Even if you're not welcome anywhere else, you are welcome here at Trans Mama's Guide. Thank you for coming along. I am proud and honored to be including you as part of the family. And I hope you feel safe and welcome here. I've been your Trans Mama, and I'll see you tomorrow.